Good morning, distinguished administrators, deans, and colleagues. I am Fides del Castillo from De La Salle University here in the Philippines. It is an honor to be here with you as a fellow educator from Southeast Asia who shares many of the same institutional hopes and struggles that you carry in your own institutions and universities. When I was preparing for this talk, I did not want it to sound abstract, but I wanted it to come from my own lived experience, from conversations with administrators, faculty, and community partners across our region. Because in truth, when we speak about leadership, internationalization, and research governance, we are speaking about people, about purpose, and about the futures we are shaping through our own institutions. Allow me to begin by situating our conversations through two intentions. First, I hope we can reflect together on leadership practices in higher education institutions through Asian cultural and governance lenses. Second, I invite us to examine how our internationalization strategies are shaped, sometimes constrained, sometimes enriched, by our regional, national, and institutional context. I frame this as reflections rather than prescriptions because I come here not to give answers but to open shared questions. If there is one message I have learned in my own administrative journey, it is this. There is no one size fits all model in higher education governance because context matters. I remember sitting in meetings where global benchmarks were presented as universal standards, as if institutional histories, national development stages, or cultural values could not simply be set aside. But our universities are not built in laboratories. They are built in societies, sometimes complex, textures, unequal, hopeful societies. And so leadership must always be contextual leadership. Bonaventura de Sosa Santos writes, "The local is not a miniature version of the global. It is the world in itself." This quote has stayed with me for many years because it reminds me that when we design programs, research agendas, or partnerships, we are not looking on small fragments of a global system. We should be looking and working within full worlds, linguistic worlds, cultural worlds, ecological worlds. For Indonesian universities, with your geography, civilizational diversity, and strong community traditions, this is deeply resonant. Another one is that bell hooks invite us to see from the margins, not only from the center. In my own work called Daylayan Theology, it particularly engaged in communities on the peripheries. I have learned that some of the most profound insights do not come from conference halls, but from coastal villages, from upland schools and indigenous councils. This is why I often speak about listening to voices from the margins, because governance that listens becomes governance that transforms. And I believe many of you here practice already through community engagement, faith-based mission, and local partnership. UNESCO reminds us that indigenous knowledge systems are knowledge for the future, not relics of the past. Whenever I visit universities across Southeast Asia, I am always struck by how many knowledge lives outside formal laboratories and classrooms. For example, in farming systems, fisheries, herbal medicine, and land stewardship. Imagine if internationalization platforms amplify these knowledges rather than sideline them. Imagine if global research agendas were shaped partly from our indigenous epistemologies. That would be very wonderful. An indigenous studies maxim says, if you want to know the world, listen to the many worlds within it. For me, this speaks to research governance. Our universities must become spaces where multiple knowledge systems meet scientific, cultural, ecological, spiritual. It should dialogue. Another author challenges Asia not only to learn but to speak. This resonates strongly with me. For too long, internationalization meant benchmarking ourselves against Western institutions, their rankings, their publication system, their mobility structures. But increasingly, Asian universities are generating frameworks of our own, develop model rooted in social cohesion, sustainability, and regional cooperation. Your institutions in Indonesia are part of that emerging voice. One maxim I often share with administrators is this: a nation's university must serve its people before they serve rankings. Rankings are visible, but service is felt. And when communities feel the presence of universities through teaching, training, through health programs, sustainability initiatives, legitimacy grows. Governance must therefore balance prestige with purpose. When we talk about global excellence, internationalization remains essential. But as the principle reminds us, global excellence requires local relevance. The most meaningful partnerships I have seen are those grounded in shared regional concerns like disaster risk reduction, food security, climate resilience, educational access. When partnerships respond to local realities, they become transformative rather than symbolic. Another lesson from South to South cooperation: partnership must be reciprocal, not hierarchical. I say this gently but honestly. Many collaborations still mirror unequal structures. Moving forward, we must design partnerships where knowledge flows both ways, where agenda setting is shared, where credit is mutual. Allow me now to shift from presentation to reflection. If universities are shaped by context, how should governance change? Should evaluation system expand? Should promotion criteria value community research? Should leadership training include cultural intelligence? The next question is, whose knowledge counts in defining global higher education? This is not merely philosophical, it is structural because it affects funding, publication, curriculum, and voice. And finally, how do we ensure internationalization amplifies rather than erases local voices? For me, this is the moral center of global engagement. Now, allow me to close personally. Whenever I gather with fellow administrators in Southeast Asia, I feel a quiet solidarity. We govern institutions in rapidly changing societies. We balance tradition and innovation. We carry both regulatory pressures and social expectations, and yet I remain hopeful because if Asian universities lead from their own context, grounded, reciprocal, socially engaged, we do not stand at the margins of global higher education, but rather we help redefine its center. Terima kasih. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po.